Hey, welcome back, Cloud Scholars. I hope your day is going well. My name is Kieran Tross, and I'm here with part two to Azure Log Analytics Workspaces. In part one, we talked about, what is a Log Analytics Workspace and showed you how to create one. So if you don't know how to do that, I would suggest you go to part one so that this way you can get up to speed of what's going on here. In part two, in this video, what I'm going to do is talk about sending data to your workspace. I'm going to show you the different ways that we can send data to your workspace based on the resource that is. So on the screen right now, we have our Log Analytics workspace called Scholars Workspace. What I want to do is show you something. When you originally create these workspaces, what happens is there is tables, and these tables, there are default tables that's within it. These are the defaults right out the box. You have alert, app center errors, computer group, usage, etc., etc. Once you start sending data, these tables start to populate and start to grow, and they'll have names associated with the resource that you send. So what I want to do is just talk a little bit about the different ways that we can send data to our Log Analytics workspace. So when it comes to sending data to your Log Analytics workspace, we can do it three ways. So we have the manual way of doing things where you go to diagnostic settings of the resource and you say, okay, send it to the Log Analytics workspace. That way it doesn't really work, right? If you have a lot of resources, you're not going to keep clicking and saying, okay, send here, send here, send here. That's not really the best way of doing things. Then you also have the Azure policy, right? Which that's the way I'm going to show you how to do it. Then you also have data collection rules as well, but data collection rules works with virtual machines, right? So that's your on-premise virtual machines using Azure Arc, and that is your virtual machines in the cloud, your Windows and Linux machines. One other thing that I do want to mention, if you were to send data to a Log Analytics workspace and you could force it that way, you could also do Terraform, right, or some kind of infrastructure as code and put that and build that into that resource. This way, when it's built out, it says, okay, go to send the diagnostic settings there. So that's another way. I don't have it up here because I'm not really going to show you that in this video. So what I want to start off with is talk a little bit of Azure policies. Right, so what we have on the screen, this diagram is within this box, everything is wrapped within the Azure policy. And the resource that I'm going to use is the public IP address. And what I'm doing is I'm going to wrap this public IP address through the Azure policy and any public IP address thereof. So that this way I can deploy diagnostic settings and say, hey, send this to a Log Analytics workspace. So what happens is we have a bunch of options. You can have built-in policies, you can have a custom policy, or you can do a policy initiative. It's really up to you. Now, there's a bunch of built-in policies that should probably suffice for you to set up, so you don't really have to do too much. Azure has done pretty much the work for you. Then you say apply it to a scope. So you can say, okay, I only want certain resource groups to have this policy applied to, or you can say, I want to do it to the whole subscription and then do an exclusion as well. And then finally, you say, okay, which Log Analytics workspace this information is going to go to. So I said to you before, I'm going to talk to you about the manual way of doing it and then also through Azure policy. So back over here at the Azure portal, what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump over to this tab right here. I have some information here. I'm going to go to this testing key vault 324, one that I have provisioned. And what I'll do is I can come down here to diagnostic settings and I can do add diagnostic settings. Over here, I can send all the logs. So I can say audit, and I can do all logs, metrics, etc. And I can call it whatever I want. So I can say diagnostic setting name, keys, key vault, diagnostic. Just making something up. And I have a bunch of options, right? So I can say send to Log Analytics Workspace, archive to a storage account, stream to Event Hub, or send to a partner solution. So we're working with send to Log Analytics Workspace. And then right here, when I do that, it's already showing you subscription. So if you have more than one subscription, you'll be able to check down and choose your subscription. I only have one. And then also with Log Analytics Workspace, you see we have different options, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose the Scholars Workspace East US. And then once I finish doing that, I can click on Save. And then it's going to update its diagnostic settings. All right, so that is completed. That is the manual way of going about doing something like that. So if you imagine if you have a bunch of key vaults here, that means you'd have to go into each key vault, go to diagnostic settings, and repeat that same process. I don't know about you, but that is very time consuming. So what I would like to do is I have some public IP addresses, just like our diagram. So I have this demo web pub right here that I can use as well. And as you notice, you can do diagnostic settings as well. When I click on diagnostic settings, if you notice, these settings are different from what the key vault had. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to type in key vaults. Well, it's already there. And I want you to notice something. Diagnostic settings. There are different diagnostic settings based on what resource you're choosing. So this diagnostic settings for key vault says audit logs, Azure policy evaluation details, and all metrics. That's what that one says. For a public IP address, you'll see here it says DDoS protection notifications, flow logs of DDoS mitigation decisions, reports of DDoS mitigations, and all metrics. It's very important that you understand what you're capturing and why you're capturing it for. You may follow a framework for your organization that says you need to capture network logs in order to make sure that you are staying compliant with whatever compliance you need to stay with. That could be HIPAA, that could be some NIST, whatever. It's different for each organization. But you want to capture these logs because this way you might send this information. So let's say what's going on right now is you're always hearing in the news about some type of DDoS attack or a brute force password or some ransomware attack. So you're going to want to make sure that you're looking at your network and seeing if there's a lot of network traffic or anything malicious happening. And this is one of the reasons why you want to capture this, because you might be sending this to a SIM tool or something like that, right? When I say SIM tool, it's a security tool that, a lot of security architects use in order to query and, monitor their environment. So I don't want to go through this. Imagine if I have 40 public IP addresses, I'm not going to go through this whole setup all the time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to policy, and I'll show you how to do it through policy. And what I'll do is I'll go to policy definitions. Now, if you clicked on policy definitions, it does take a little while sometimes for it to populate. I'm obviously cutting the video and editing it, but it did take a little while. So I'm gonna go to search and I'm gonna say deploy diagnostic settings, and I'll press enter. And then this way it's gonna help filter that out. So I'll say for a pub. Let me see what happens. I'll say if I say public IP address, hopefully I can find it. I can never deploy diagnostic settings for, it says service bus. It's not giving me public IP address. So let me come here. Let me just type in public IP. And I already have some stuff already set up here. Over here, enable login by category, by group. Public IP address should have resource logs enabled for Azure DDoS protection. Yep, there it goes. So this is one that already has an assignment, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through this. And what I did is I've done a video about this specific scenario where I was talking about Azure policies. Obviously, this video is more about Azure Log Analytics Workspaces, but the reason why I wanted to go through this again because I thought that it would be beneficial for you as well. But I do have video talking about Azure policies if you want to understand Azure policies. So what does this Azure policy do? It says public IP addresses should have a resource log enabled for Azure DDoS protection standard. Enable resource logs for public IP address in a diagnostic setting to stream to a log analytics workspace. So this is exactly what we need. And you see right here, we have different parameters that you can set up for it. And it says allowed values, audit if not exist, deploy if not exist, and disabled, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to assign this. And I believe the public IP address, let's see what scope that is in. Our public IP address, what scope are we? Okay, we're in that RG East US. So for the scope, I'm going to make sure that it's RG East US. I can do the whole subscription if I wanted to, but I'll just leave it to RG East US. This is exactly what I was referring to earlier. You can have some exclusions. So let's just say if I did for the whole subscription, I can exclude certain items if I wanted to, some resources. I could put a description in here, but I don't really care to do that. So next, I'm fine with that, the way that looks. I could add a resource selector. I don't really need any of these options right here. And then parameters, what I'll have is I'll take this off right here, and then you can have different parameters, right? I don't even know why they keep doing it that way, because you might as well be able to see everything. And I'll just do deploy if not exist, and diagnostic name, I'll just call it public IP diagnost. Public IP diag. That's fine. For our workspace, we're going to do our Scholarless workspace. Enable logs, we'll leave as true. Enable metrics, we'll do as true as well. And what it's asking about here is enable logs and enable metrics. If I go to public IP address and I click here and I go to diagnostic settings, and it's talking about this enable logs and then this whole metrics thing. That's why it's showing up like that. So what I can do is I'll click on next, and this is the remediation. So right, what this means is by default, this assignment will only take effect on newly created resources. Existing resources can be updated via a remediation task after the policy is assigned. So what this is going to do is say, okay, I'm putting this policy in place for all resources, but a remediation is going to say, I'm also going to now take a look at what you have already set up and configured in your environment, and I'm going to say, oh, okay, that doesn't have anything on it. So what I'm going to do is now wrap it in the policy as well for things that are already set up. So that's pretty much it. Now it says for deploy if not exist policies, the remediation task will deploy the specified template. For modify policy, the remediation task will edit tags on the existing one. So we already have deploy if not exist. That was the parameters that we selected. Deploy if not exist, so we know we're good there. And then it says, the identity will also be given the following permission. So it has to basically use a manage identity for that to work. So that is how we need to get this to go through. So I think I need to do this as well, I believe. And system manager identity, user manager identity, which is fine, just to make sure that that goes through. And then non-compliant message, we can put a compliant message here when somebody's creating a public IP address to say, hey, if they don't have the diagnostic settings set, say, hey, you're out of compliance, or whatever we want to put down there. So I'll just click on next, and then I'll click on create. So we do have to let our policies take some time to work in our environment. So I'm going to give the policy a little time to work in the environment, and then I'm going to come back. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the table for our Log Analytics workspace to see if we have any extra tables showing up in that workspace. All right, so we are back. Gave it a little bit of time. One thing I do want to tell you all is that with using Azure policies, they do take some time to take place. Obviously, I'm making an edit in this video. I had to run out yesterday and was unable to continue to wrap up the video. So I did run a command that I want to show you all. Not really sure if it worked, but I ran an Azure CLI command to kind of force a policy scan. So this is the Azure CLI command I ran, the top one. I said Azure policy state trigger scan. So I looked online. I've never used this command before. So I said, let me just try it out. But unfortunately, I had to run. Something happened in my house, and I had to run. Nothing bad, though, but I had to run and was unable to come back to finishing up this video until the following day. So obviously, my policy is in place and showing up. So I don't know if this would work. So I'm just interested if anybody has run this command before. Please let me know if it's worked for you and how long it have taken. Just please leave it in the comments. We're all here just to learn some more. But anyway, let's get back to the Azure portal. All right, so back over the Azure portal, if I go over here to demo, that was the public IP address, and I go to my diagnostic settings, there it is. So what we want to do is we want to see what information is now populated in our Log Analytics workspace. So I'm going to go to tables. And if you look at our table, now we have more information. We sent our key vault over there, and we sent our public IP address. So you remember, this will show you a really quick screenshot of what was, how it looked originally when we first created a workspace in part 1 video. So this is the screenshot of how our table looked when it was first provisioned. So this is how it will look when it first was created. And here is how it looks once again after we started sending data to it. So that wraps up this video. This is part two. This is sending data to your log analytics workspace, but we're really concentrating on doing manual setups in this video, and then also using Azure policies. I'm gonna in part three, I'm gonna talk more about sending data to your log analytics workspace, but this is gonna be more about data collection rules. So I hope that this video was beneficial for you. Please smash and like that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. I really enjoy making these videos for you, and I'm hoping that this would make things a little bit easier for you. I know reading the Microsoft documentation is not always the easiest thing to do. As always, the goal here is to get you from scholar to consultant and from consultant to expert. Thank you, and see you next time.